Invoke method activity in UiPath. What is it for? Which methods can I invoke in this activity? How to use it in a correct way? What should I put in each field in the properties of this activity? Do you want to learn more about this activity? In this video I will explain everything in detail about this activity, so that you can use it for any function you need in your project. It's for very beginners, who have no idea about this activity and how to use it. It sounds interesting? Then please watch the video to the end, and don't forget to subscribe my channel. Let's go! Before I start explaining the activity and how to use it, let me first explain two important points to you, which you should know. The first and most important point is to know which methods are to call using this activity. So we use this activity to call a method, but which method is it? The methods are from .NET library. What does it mean? Let's see. In Google I will search for example for the system namespace in Microsoft documentation. I am searching for the class system. Here under system you can find the different members of this class. For example array. Under each member you can find methods. For example we have the following methods for array. We can use any method to invoke in UiPath using the Invoke Method activity. For example clear method. We have the following structure for this method. I will explain later how to understand a method and use it in UiPath. But now I only want to show you which methods we can use in Invoke Method activity. Or for example copy method, which has different structures. Or getLength, to get the length of an array. Or sort method, to sort an array. Here we also have different structures for the same method. As you see we have many methods here under array, which we can use in UiPath for an array variable. Let's see another member, for example boolean. Here we have again methods. For example parse method, to get a true or false from an input. And many other methods for boolean variables. Let's see the member console for example. With member, that we have another class within the class system. It means here, that console is a class under the class system. We have again different methods, like WriteLine Method, to print a text in the console. Let's see the member math. Here we also have different methods to do mathematical functions. For example the method max, to get the max from two different values. We have also the member string. Here we have again different methods. For example contains method, to check if a string contains a specific text. Or replace method, to replace a specific text with a new text in a string. As you see, we have always different members under a class. And for each member we have different methods. Each method can we use in UiPath in the activity, Invoke Method. In summary, Invoke Method is to call these methods. And Invoke Method is an API, which we use to call these methods in UiPath. I was here in system class, but we have many other classes and members, which also have different methods. That's all about the first point. The second point you have to know is, that a method can be static or non-static. What does each one mean and what is the difference between the both? How can I know, if the method is static or non-static? It's a big topic, which I cannot explain here in the video. But I will explain to you the most important points, what you have to know, so that you can use the methods in a correct way. If you want to use a static method, you don't need to create an instance. If you want to use non-static method, you need to create an instance. This is the difference between the both types. But what does it exactly mean? What do I mean with instance? Let's see the following two methods. WriteLine has the following structure. And contains has the following structure. As you see, we have the word static in the first method. And we don't have the word static in the second method, which means that this method is non-static method. This is how to differentiate between static and non-static. Now let's see, what does an instance mean, and when I need it? I will start with the second method, contains. As mentioned, for non-static methods we need to create an instance of the class. This method is for the class system.string. It means here, that I need to create a variable of type system.string. Then I can use the method for this variable. Creating the variable means that I create an instance of this class. So we use the method as follows. We set the variable, which we created, for example my string. Then I can use the method. You can also use the method without variable, but directly with a string text. For example this statement. It's the same as when I create a variable. Because using this text means that I also created an instance. Let's see the other method, WriteLine. It's from class system.console. As mentioned, it's a static method. This means that I don't need to create an instance of this class. I don't need to create a variable of type system.console. So I can use the method directly without any instances. The statement looks like this one. As you see, we use the method without using any instances before it. This is the difference between the both methods. Later in the video you will understand why we differentiate between static and non-static methods. Let's summarize the second point. We have static and non-static methods. For static methods we don't need to create an instance. For non-static methods we need to create an instance. You can differentiate between static and non-static methods using the word static in the method structure. That's all about the second point. If you understood these 2 points, then you are ready to watch the video. If you didn't understand these 2 points, please watch this part again. These 2 points are important for you, so that you know how to use the invoke method activity later. Let's now start explaining the activity. I will first explain the properties of the activity invoke method in general. Later I will explain it in detail, how to use the activity and what to set in each field. I will show you many different examples, so that you are able at the end of this video to use any method. So let's see the properties. The first one is TargetType. We fill in this field in case we want to invoke a static method. So if you want to invoke static method, you need to fill in this field, but in case you want to invoke non-static method, you don't need to fill in this field. You set null here. We write in this field the class name. The next one is TargetObject. We fill in this field in case we want to invoke a non-static method. We write here the instance, which we want to edit. In summary, we always use only one property from these 2 properties. It depends on the method which we want to use, if it's a static or non-static method. The next property is MethodName. Here we write the method name, for example contains, replace, WriteLine, etc. You don't need to write the class name, only the method name. The next property is parameters. Here we add the parameters we need for the method. For example, the method WriteLine needs a parameter of type string. It's the text we want to write in the console. So we add this text as parameter. I will explain later how to know which parameters we need for each method and how to set them. The next property is result. Here we can create a variable to store the output of the method. For example, the method contains. The output of this method is a Boolean variable. So we can create here a variable of type Boolean. Important to know here, that you can create any variable type here. It depends on the method. For example, if the output of the method is Boolean, you can create a Boolean variable, but if the output is a data table, you can create a data table variable. And so on, we can create the variable we need here. And also important to know, that not each method has a result. For example, the method WriteLine doesn't have an output, because we only write a text in the console. In this case we don't need to set a variable here. These are the properties, which we need to use once we want to invoke a method. Let me now explain to you, how is the structure of a method, so that you can use it in UiPath in the correct way. I will explain the structure using these 2 methods. So we have always at the beginning an access modifier. For example public, but we also have the following access modifiers. What does each one mean, and what is the difference between these modifiers, is not important for us in this video. But if you are interested to learn more about them, I will add the link in the video description, so that you can read them and learn the difference between all these modifiers. For us is important the modifier public. We always use invoke method to invoke a public method. Public means that the type or member can be accessed by any other code in the same assembly, or another assembly that references it. After modifier we have the method type. We have either the word static or we don't have anything here. Static means that the method is a static method. If we don't have anything, it means that the method is non-static method. The next part is the output. Here we have either a data type or the word void. Data type, for example bool for Boolean output, or string for string output, and so on. This means we have an output of type Boolean, for example, so we need to create a Boolean variable to store the result of this method. Or void, which means that we don't have an output from this method. The next part is the method name. For example, WriteLine, contains, replace, or something else. And the last part is the parameters. Here we set in brackets the parameters, which we need for the method. We see always the type of the parameter, then the name. The name is not important, because it's not needed to use the method. The name is for the method itself. For us is the type of the parameter important. For example, WriteLine method has only one parameter of type string. This means, we need to set this parameter, so that we can use the method. But we can also have more than one parameter. These are the parts of a method. Now I will show you how to fill in the properties of Invoke Method activity, once you want to use it. I will first explain it here, then I will switch to UiPath, to show you different methods, how to use them. First you have to check if the method is static or non-static. As mentioned, you can check it using the word static in the method structure. If the word is in the method structure or not. In case the method is static, you have to write the class name and target type. For example, system.console, if you want to use the method WriteLine. The target object is not to fill in. So you have to leave it empty. But in case the method is non-static, you set null in target type. And in TargetObject you add your instance. For example, if you have an array variable, and you want to invoke a method for this array variable, you have to add the array variable in TargetObject. This means that the array variable is the instance. The next step is to write the method name. Here you only add the method name, without the class name. For example, WriteLine, contains, replace, etc. The next step is to add the parameters. If you have more than one parameter, you have to add the parameters in the correct order. For example, the method replace has two parameters. Both are of type string. You have first to add the first parameter, and then the second one. Later in the practice you will understand it better. And the last step is to set the result. As mentioned before, a method could have an output. In case a method has an output, you have to create a variable to store the output. The variable type should be the same as what we have in the method structure. For example, the method contains has an output of type Boolean. In this case you have to create a Boolean variable to store the output of this method. These are the steps, what you have to do once you want to invoke a method. Let's now practice what we learned in this video. I will show you different examples, how to use different methods in UiPath. I have about 13 examples, what I will show you in this video. I will first tell you which method I will implement. Then I will implement it. If you want to learn better, then please pause the video once I tell you which method I will use. Then you can try to use it by yourself. And then you can check the result, if it's correct. Let's go. I will start with the first example, WriteLine Method. Here is the structure of this method. And also the class name. We have the following parts, which we have to fill in. You can do it now alone, and then you can check if your result is the same as my result. So pause the video and try it yourself. Let's start one by one. As mentioned, we check first if the method is static or non-static. As you see, we have the word static, which means that we have a static method. In this case we have to write the class name and target type. The target object is not to fill in. And the method name is WriteLine. The fourth part is parameters. As you see, we have only one parameter of type string ? What does the question mark mean? It means that the type is nullable. In this case it's string nullable, which means that we could have a string, or also nothing. Assume we want to print the text, hello world. So we can write this text as parameter, or we can create a variable of type string, and store this text in the variable. And then we can use the variable. I will write the text directly. And the last part is the result. As you see, we have the word void, which means that we don't have a result from this method. So we don't need to add anything here. That's it. Let's try to do it in UiPath and check the result. I will first add the activity invoke method. As mentioned, target object should be empty. In target type I will write the class name. I will browse for the class name. It's system.console. Let's add it. And now I will add the method name. Let's now add the parameters. As mentioned, we need only one parameter of type string. I will write the text directly here. So this text will be printed out in the output console. And we don't have a result, so I leave it empty. I will run the code now, to check the result. As you see, we have the text hello world. It works. This was an easy example. Let's see the second method. It's max method, to return the larger of two specified numbers. It's from class system.math. I will fill in the different parts here, then I will do it in UiPath later. So first we check if we have a static or non-static method. It's a static method. This means we need to write the class name and target type. And we leave the target object empty. Then we write the method name. After that we add the parameters. We have two parameters of type integer. So we add the both. You can add the numbers directly, or also using two variables, where you store the numbers. And we have here an output of type integer. So we need to create a variable of type integer, to store the result of this method. For example, variable max number. The result is the max number from the both input numbers. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. First I will add Invoke Method activity. In TargetType I will add the class name. It's system.math. I am searching for it as I did for the previous example. I will leave target object empty. And here the method name, max. Let's now add the parameters. As mentioned, we have two parameters. Both are of type integer. I will write the numbers here, but you can also create variables of type integer, and you can use the variables here. So we have these two numbers, and we want to get the larger of these two numbers. It means, I should get number 5 as output, because 5 is bigger than 2. And the last thing we have to do is to create a variable for the result. It should also be of type integer, therefore I will change the type to integer. I will add WriteLine activity, to print the number in the console, so that you can see the result. Let's now run the code to check the result. As you see, we have the number 5 as output. That's it. Let's now move to the next method. It's contains method, to check if a string contains a specific text. It's from class system.string. I will fill in the different parts here, then I will do it in UiPath later. So first we check if we have a static or non-static method. Here we don't have the word static, which means that the method is non-static method. So here we leave the target type empty. I mean equal to null. And we set the variable in target object. The variable is the instance, which I want to check if it contains a specific text. Then we write the method name. After that we add the parameters. We have only one parameter of type string. So we add here again the text directly, or we use a variable. For example, I want to check if the variable my string contains the letter M. And we have here an output of type boolean. So we need to create a variable of type boolean, to store the result of this method. For example, variable char exists. The result is true, if we have the letter M in the variable my string. Or it's false, if we don't have the letter in the string variable. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. First I will create a variable of type string. It means I am creating an instance, because we have non-static method. I will set the default value for this variable here, for example hello world. Now I will add Invoke Method activity. As mentioned, target type should be null, because we have non-static method. And in target object we add the instance. I mean the variable which I already created. And the method name is contains. Maybe you ask yourself, why I don't have to add the class name and target type if the method is non-static? It's very simple, because we already have an instance of the same class. For example, The class name here is system.string. And my instance is also of type system.string. Therefore we don't need to add the class name. Now we add the parameters. We only have one parameter of type string. I will add the letter H for example. So I want to check the variable, if it contains the letter H or not. And the last thing we have to do is setting a variable for the result. The variable should be of type Boolean. Now I will add WriteLine activity to print the result in the output console. Let's run the code to check the result. As you see, we have true as output, because we have the letter H in the variable myString. Let's now move to the next method. It's replace method, to replace a specific text in a string instance with another specific text. It's from class system.string. I will fill in the different parts here, then I will do it in UiPath later. So first we check, if we have a static or non-static method. Here we don't have the word static, which means that the method is non-static method. We set TargetType equal to null, because it's non-static method. And we set the instance in TargetObject. The instance is the variable, which contains a text and I want to edit it. Then we write the method name, replace. After that we add the parameters. We have two parameters of type string. The first parameter is the old value, what I want to replace. And the second parameter is the new value, what I want to set instead of the old one. We can use variables for the both parameters, or we can set the values directly. Assume we have the following text in the instance. And I want to replace the word hello with the word welcome. So I set the old value equal to hello. And the new value equal to welcome. And we have here an output of type string. We can here use the same variable, if we want to store the result in the same variable, or we can also create a new variable. Assume I want to store the changes in the same variable, so I will add the same variable in the result. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. At the beginning I will add Invoke Method activity. First I have to add an instance. It's the variable here. And the method name, replace. And now the parameters. So we need two parameters. The first one is the old value. And the second one is the new value. Please make sure, you always write the parameters in the same order, as what we have in the method structure, else the method will be not correct executed, or you could have an error. So I want to replace the word hello with the word welcome. And for the result I will add the same variable, because I want to save the changes in the same variable, but you can create a new variable of type string. At the end I will add WriteLine activity, to print the variable in the output console, to see if the word is replaced. Let's run the code now. As you see, we have the new value now. Let's move on to the next method. We have now the method AddDays, to add days for a datetime variable. It's from class system.datetime. I will fill in the different parts here, then I will do it in UiPath later. So first we check, if we have a static or non-static method. Here we don't have the word static, which means that the method is non-static method. We set TargetType equal to null, because it's non-static method. And we set the instance in TargetObject. The instance is a variable of type datetime, for which I want to add days. For example the variable time now, which contains the current date and time. Then we write the method name, AddDays. After that we add the parameters. We have only one parameter of type double. This parameter is the number of days, which I want to add to the instance. For example I will add the number 5, to add 5 days for the datetime variable. And we have here an output of type datetime. Here I can also use the same instance to store the result, or I can create a new datetime variable to store the new date in a new variable. I will store the new value in the same variable. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. I have here an assign activity, to calculate the current time. This time will be stored in this variable, time now, of type datetime. Then I have a WriteLine activity, to print this time into the console. I will add Invoke Method activity, and fill in the different parts. Target type is null. Target object should contain the instance. The instance here is the variable time now. And the method name is AddDays. Now the parameters. We have only one parameter. I want to add 5 days for time now variable. As mentioned, the parameter is of type double, therefore I will change the type to double. And I want to store the result in the same variable. Let's copy this WriteLine activity before the invoke method, so that you can see the variable before adding the days, and also after adding the days. I will run the code to check the result. As you see, we have first the time now variable before adding the days. And below we have the new time after adding the days. As you see, we have 5 days more in the second date time. Let's move on to the next method. It's sort method, to sort an array variable. The class name here is system.array. I will fill in the different parts here, then I will do it in UiPath later. I have for example the following array, which I want to sort using the current culture. So first we check, if we have a static or non-static method. As you see we have the word static, which means it's a static method. In this case we fill in the target type and leave the target object empty. So in target type we write the class name, system.array. And target object empty. And the method name is sort. We have only one parameter of type array. So here we add an array, which we want to sort. And the last thing we have to fill in is the result. As you see we have the word void, which means we don't have an output. You ask yourself now, why I don't have an output? How can I store the sorted array? There is something wrong. No, it's correct, we don't have an output, but the sorted array will be automatically stored in the array parameter. How does it work? Array variables, and also many other data types have the property that changes will be automatically saved. It means here, for example, that I don't need to set the array variable as output, because the changes will be automatically saved. So for this method I will leave the result empty. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. I have here the array, which I want to sort. And I also have a loop to print out the contents of this array. It's of type string. First I will add Invoke Method activity. As mentioned, we need to add the class name first, because it's a static method. It's system.array. And we leave the target object empty. And here the method name, sort. Now the parameters. We only have one parameter of type array. So we add the array variable here, which we want to sort. It's a string array. And as mentioned, no need to set an output variable. I will copy this loop to print the array contents after invoking the method sort. So we have here the array. Then we print the contents. After that we sort the array. And again we print the contents, but after sorting. Let's run the code to check the result. As you see, we have first the array without sorting. And below we have the same array, but after sorting. So the array is sorted. Let's move on to another method. It's copy method, to copy a data table into another data table. It's to copy the structure and also the data. It means, we copy the columns and also the rows. The class name here is system.data.datatable. I will fill in the different parts here, then I will do it in UiPath later. I have for example my table, which I want to copy into new table. So first we check, if we have a static or non-static method. As you see, we don't have the word static. So it's non-static method. It means, we set the target type null. And the target object is the instance. It means I set here the table, which I want to copy. In my example it's my table. And the method name is copy. And we don't have parameters in this method, so no need to add anything. And we have an output of type DataTable. So here we need to set the table, where we want to copy the data. In my example it's new table. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. I have here a build data table activity. The table consists of 2 columns. I don't have any data here, but I could also have data. And I have here WriteLine activity, to print the columns count in the output console. The table name is my table. Let's add Invoke Method activity. TargetType is null, because it's non-static method. In TargetObject I will add the table, which I want to copy. It's my table. And the method name is copy. We don't have any parameters. And we have to set a variable for the output, where we want to copy the table. For example, new table variable. It should be of type DataTable. I will copy the WriteLine activity, to print out the columns count of the new table, to check if the table is copied. Let's now run the code. As you see, we have first the number 2 from the first WriteLine activity. It's the columns count of my table. And below we also have the number 2 from the second WriteLine activity. It's the columns count of new table. So the table is successfully copied. Let's move on to another method. It's compute method. The class name here is also system.data.datatable. It's to compute the given expression on the current rows that pass the filter criteria. I have for example the following data table, which consists of 2 columns and 7 rows. I want to get the sum of column amount, where the ID is equal to 1. So I should get 500 as result. I can do that using this method. I will fill in the different parts here, then I will do it in UiPath later. So first we check if we have a static or non-static method. As you see, we don't have the word static. So it's non-static method. It means, we set the target type null. And the target object is the instance. It means I set here the data table variable. For example my table. And the method name is compute. We have 2 parameters in this method, both of type string. The first one is expression, what I want to do. In my example I want to get the sum of column amount. So I set this expression as first parameter. And the second parameter is the filter. As mentioned, I only want to get the sum where the ID is equal to 1. So I will set this filter as second parameter. And we have an output of type object. So here I can create a variable to store the output. It should be of type object. Object type covers all data types. In my example it's an integer result, but I will store it in an object type, because the method structure contains object as output. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. I have here a build data table activity. In this activity I have the following table, which consists of 2 columns, ID and amount. It's the same table, what I showed you before. As you see, we have different IDs, some of them appears more than once in the table. And here we have different values. I want to get the sum of all rows in the column amount, where the ID is equal to 1. It means, I want to get the sum of these 2 values. The table name is my table. First I will add Invoke Method activity. I will set the table variable in TargetObject. And the method name is compute. Let's now set the parameters. The first one is the expression. It means, here I set what I want to do. So I want to get the sum of the column amount. And the second one is the filter. So I want to get the sum only for the rows, where the ID is equal to 1. I can leave this parameter empty. In this case, I will get the sum of the entire column, amount. Please make sure, you add for the first parameter an aggregate function, like sum, count or mathematical functions. And for the result I will create a variable to store the output. It should be of type object, therefore I will change the type to object. And at the end I will add WriteLine activity, to print the result in the output console, to show you the result. Let's run the code now. As you see, we have 500 as result. It's the sum of the first two rows, where the ID is equal to 1. That's it. Let's move on to the next method. It's add method. The class name here is system.data.dataRowCollection. This method is to create a row using specified values, and add this row to a data row collection. Data row collection is the same as a data table variable with the property rows. It means, for example, I have the data table my table. If I write my table.rows, it means I have now a data row collection. So this class is a collection of data rows. I have the following table, which consists of 3 columns. It contains different rows. I want to add a new row to this table. Let's see how can I do that. I will fill in the different parts here, then I will do it in UiPath later. So first we check if we have a static or non-static method. As you see, we don't have the word static. So it's non-static method. It means we set the target type null. And the target object is the instance. The instance here is, as mentioned, the rows of the table. For example, my table.rows. And the method name is add. We have only one parameter. It's of type ArrayObject. It means I should add an array as parameter. This array should contain the values for each column. For example, the following array. As you see, we have 3 values, because the table has 3 columns. And we have an output of type data row. It means I should create a variable of type data row to store the output. But DataTable is a complex data type, so that we don't have to add an output to store the changes. The changes will be automatically saved, without adding any output. So I will leave it empty, but as mentioned, the new row will be added into this table. But if you want to use this method to create a data row variable, you have to create a variable of type data row to store the output. But I am using this method now to add a row into an existing table, therefore I will not add any output. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. I have here build data table activity. The table is stored in this variable. The table consists of 3 columns and 4 rows. As you see, we have the IDs 1 to 4. I want to add a new row for this table. And I have here for each row loop, to print the content of column ID in the console. Let's add Invoke Method activity. First I will add the target object. It's the table rows. And the method name is add. Let's now add the parameters. As mentioned, we only have one parameter of type ArrayObject. Let's add it. I will add the following values for the new row. We have 3 columns, therefore I have 3 values, but you can also add only one value. The value will be added in the first column. Please make sure you write the values in the correct order, as the order of the columns in the table. So the first one is the ID, the second one is the amount, and the third one is the name column. As mentioned, I don't want to store the new row in a variable, but I want to add it directly to the table, therefore I will not add any output. But in case you want to save this created row in a data row variable, you have to create a data row variable and add it here. I will add this loop after Invoke Method, so that you can check the changes before Invoke Method and after it. Let's now run the code. As you see, we have only 4 IDs before invoking the method. And we have 5 IDs after invoking the method. So the row is successfully added into the table. Let's now move on to the next method. It's remove method, to remove a column from a data table. The class name is system.data.dataColumnCollection. Here it's the same as the data row collection, but here is for columns, not for rows. So we have here a table consisting of 3 columns. I want to delete a column from this table using this method. For example, I want to delete the column amount. Let's go. First we check if the method is static or non-static. As you see, we don't have the word static. So it's non-static method. It means we set target type null. And target object should contain an instance. The instance here should be of type data column collection. So we set the table with the property columns. In this way we have a data column collection. And the method name is remove. We have only one parameter of type string. So here we write the column name as string, which we want to delete. For example, the column amount. And we don't have an output, because we have the word void. So no need to set anything for the result. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. I have here a data table variable. This is my table, which consists of 3 columns. I want to remove the second column from this table. I have here WriteLine activity, to print the columns count, so that we can check, how many columns do we have currently. Let's add Invoke Method activity. I will add the instance to the target object. And the method name here. Now the parameters. We only have one parameter of type string. As mentioned, I want to remove the column amount, therefore I write this name here. I forgot to write columns in TargetObject. And we don't have an output. Let's copy this WriteLine activity, to check the columns count after Invoke Method. And now I will run the code. As you see, we have first 3 columns. And after Invoke Method we only have 2 columns. Let's move on to the next method. It's GetFiles Method, to get the files from a specific directory. The class name is system.io.directory. Let's fill in the different parts here. First we check the method, if it's static or non-static. As you see, we have the word static. It means, we need to write the class name and target type. And we leave target object empty. The method name is getFiles. We have only one parameter of type string. Here we write the directory name, from which we want to get the files. For example, this directory. And we have an output of type array string. So we create a variable of type array string, to store the files. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. I have the following directory, which contains these 4 files. I want to get these files using the method getFiles. I have here this variable, where I store the directory path. I will add Invoke Method activity. First I need to set the class name. It's system.io.directory. Let's select it. And the method name is getFiles. In the parameters I will add the directory path variable, which contains the directory path. It's of type string. And I will create a variable for the output result. It should be of type array string. Let's add for each activity, to print out the file paths in the output console. I will change the type argument to string, because the array is of type string. And now I will add WriteLine activity, to print out the file paths. Let's run the code to check the result. As you see, we have the following paths for all files in the directory. That's it. Let's move on to the next method. It's ReadAllLines Method. This method opens a text file, reads all lines of the file, and then closes the file. The class name is system.io.file. Let's fill in the different parts here. First we check the method, if it's static or non-static. As you see, we have the word static. So it's a static method. It means, we need to write the class name and target type. And we leave target object empty. The method name is ReadAllLines. We have only one parameter of type string. Here we have to set the file path, which we want to read. For example, this path. And we have an output of type array string. So we need to create a variable of type array string to store the lines of the file. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. We have here the following text file, which contains the following lines. I want to read these lines. I stored the file path in this variable. Let's add Invoke Method activity. First we have to add the class name. It's system.io.file. Select it here. And the method name here. Now I will add the file path variable as parameter, because I want to read this file. And for the result I will create the following variable. Let's change the type to array string, because it should be array string. I will add for each loop, to print out the lines. Let's add WriteLine activity. And we have to change the type argument to string, because we have an array string. Let's now run the code to check the result. As you see, we have all lines from the file. That's it. Let's move on to the last method in this video. It's RenameFile Method, to rename a file. The class name is Microsoft.VisualBasic.FileIO.FileSystem. Let's fill in the different parts here. First we check the method, if it's static or non-static. As you see, we have the word static. So it's a static method. It means, we need to write the class name and target type. And we leave target object empty. The method name is RenameFile. We have two parameters of type string. For the first parameter we should set the file path, which we want to rename. It means we set the full path of the file here. For example, this path. And for the second parameter we should enter the new file name, which we want to have. For example, this one. As you see, I added the file extension with the name. So don't forget to add the file extension. And you don't need to add the full path, only the file name with the file extension, because the file will be saved in the same directory. And we don't have an output, because we have the word void. So no need to add anything here. That's it. Let's do it in UiPath. I have here file path variable of type string, where I stored the full path of the file, which I want to rename. Here is the file. First I will add Invoke Method activity. Let's add the class name and the target type, because we have a static method. This is the class, which I have to select. I will leave target object empty. And I will add the method name here. Let's now add the parameters. As mentioned, the first parameter is the full path of the file, which I want to rename. It's stored in the variable file path. And the second variable is the new name. As mentioned, only the file name and the file extension. Let's now run the code to check if the file will be renamed. As you see, we have the new name now. It works. That's all about this method. The last point I want to address in this video is the following. We have these properties for Invoke Method activity. I talked in the video about 5 properties. But we still have 2 properties. These are GenericTypeArguments and RunAsynchronously. What does these mean and how to use them? GenericTypeArguments is to set the generic type argument for the method. It means, we have created our own data type, which we want to use in Invoke Method activity. So here we use this property, so that we can use our data type for Invoke Method. It's very advanced, what I will explain in another video. For the standard methods you don't need this property. And the last property is run asynchronously. Here we check the box, if we want to run the method asynchrone. Example for asynchrone methods is threading. I will also talk about this property in another video. For now you don't need it. That's all about the invoke method activity in UiPath, how to use it for any method you need. I will add the links for all methods I talked about in the video description. I hope you could learn the activity better now, and could use it for each method you need. Have a good day and see you in the next videos.